Hey everybody, I'm Adam Sweet from Soul Astrology, and today we have edition number 12 of the Anonymous Birth Charts. This is a series in which I do mini bite-sized readings based on charts and questions submitted by you all. Speaking of, let's go ahead and check out today's chart. The question says, I have not had good luck with serious relationships, and I really want to know if I will ever find my soulmate. That is a great question. Relationship questions are something that come across an astrologer's desk or desktop often, and that is because relationships are such a huge part of the human experience. So I am sorry to hear that this native has not had what they would call good luck with serious relationships, but I think that this is all about to change. I am not just sugarcoating it here. Let me show you a few dynamics coming up, so hang tight. But first, what I always like to do is just ground us in the natal chart. So this is an Aries rising. The ruler Mars is over here in the sixth house. They have a stellium in the fourth. But whenever we look towards significations of relationships, we can always look to the seventh house. The seventh house is the house opposite the first house. The first house is the native themselves, and thus the seventh house represents our closest relationships in our life. Now we can look to planets and points in that seventh house for information around relationships. We can look to the ruler of the seventh house, which in this case is Venus down here in the fifth in her own joy in Leo. Or we can look to Venus because Venus is actually the planet that naturally signifies relationships. So in this chart, I love the fact that Venus is in her own joy in the fifth house. That is a beautiful signification for relationships. So I think at this point, many of you or this native whose birth chart I'm reading may be asking, well, they said they had not had good luck with serious relationships. So what gives? Well, whenever we want to look towards something like that, I like to look towards the exaltation rulers of the house if there is one, and that's because exaltations are of the nature of the moon. The moon represents fortune, and exaltation rulers can show us the allotment of fortune around the topics of the house and sign that they rule. So in this case, Saturn is exalted in Libra, and look, Saturn is down here in the fifth house. Now, we have a little interplay of dark and light, a dyadic relationship happening here, and that's because Saturn is the god of darkness and it is in the temple of the sun. Now, anytime we find that relationship going on, that means that Saturn is in the sign opposite from its own domicile and is thus in what is called detriment or exile. Now, that does not need to be taken as a bad sign. That can literally just be telling us the story that is hidden in this question, which says, I have not had good luck with serious relationships. Well, when we have the planet that represents the allotment of fortune in exile in the house of pleasure, creativity, children, and all things sensual, then we could see that as somebody who has not up until this point in their life necessarily, in their own words, had good quote unquote luck with serious relationships. Now, the thing to remember with Saturn, though, is Saturn is that planet that is the most distant visible planet in the sky. It represents things like seriousness, austerity, and time. Not time as in clock time, but time as in like the amount of time it takes for an apple to ripen on a tree and then fall to the ground. So when we see Saturn wrapped up in significations like the allotment of fortune around relationships, we could see that potentially relationships may come into this native's life later in their life. And we can already see that's the case. They were born in 1978. So I think that means that they're 47 years old at this point. And so they are still searching for that soulmate. And Saturn would describe that here as, yes, you are probably going to eventually find your soulmate. as Venus, the planet that rules that seventh house, is in its own joy in the fifth house. But it's going to take more time because of Saturn here. Or not because of Saturn, but Saturn is representing or mirroring that expression or that karmic dynamic developing in your life. So now what we can do is we can look towards the transits to see when that karma around relationships might shift. So let's pull up the current transits. Now, I was looking at these earlier, and to be honest, I'm not seeing anything in the immediate future, as in like this month or the next couple months. We always want to see basically any slower moving outer planet from Jupiter on up activating, i.e., touching, making contact either by opposition square or conjunction to one of these rulers here in the fifth house, or a slower moving planet ingressing or about to ingress into that seventh house would also be a really nice signification. So we don't see any of that here in this chart. But what we do see coming up and not too far away is we can start then looking at eclipses, which pretty soon are going to start occurring just next spring or next late winter, early spring, are going to start occurring across that 11th, fifth house axis. The 11th house is the house of hopes and dreams, and the fifth house is that house of our pleasure and creativity and all things Venusian. But we also have the two planets that rule the seventh house in that fifth house. So let me dial up the first eclipse that I was looking at here, which is February 17th, 2026. And we have a solar eclipse now happening in the 11th house at 28 degrees. We have that exaltation ruler of the 7th house at 26 degrees. And so this solar eclipse is activating by opposition that exaltation ruler of the 7th. Now, solar eclipses are very potent, and that's because they are seeding points. They can open doors and they can initiate new things. So I love that signification for this native in terms of initiating a new fortune or a new change in circumstance and fortune around that 7th house and the allotment of fortune that Saturn represents here. But that's not all. The eclipses keep rolling through. So then we're going to jump. I am cherry picking the eclipses here that are falling within the closest degree ranges of those ruling planets, just so you all know. But there will be more eclipses occurring across that axis. But now I want to jump to, let's see, where are we at here? August 2nd, 2027 is the next very potent eclipse. And that is because now we have a solar eclipse occurring in that 5th house at 9 degrees. We see Venus, the ruler of the 7th house and the planet that naturally signifies relationships, at 8 degrees. So this solar eclipse is happening right on top of that natal Venus. And look, it is co-present with transiting Venus. So this is another beautiful signification for relationships potentially developing in the native's life. Now let's move on because there is just this tidal wave of eclipses happening for this native. So August 17th, 2027, now we have a lunar eclipse happening across that axis. So whenever we see the moon and the sun in an opposition within 18 degrees of the nodes, we know there's an eclipse occurring. And look, this is happening at 24 degrees. That natal Saturn is at 26. So now we have a lunar eclipse that's happening right on top of that exaltation ruler of the 7th house. Now, lunar eclipses are very potent because they can dramatically shift circumstance and fortune around the topics that they touch or the planets that rule the topics that they are activating. Also, this is a south node eclipse. South node eclipses can often represent karma that is about to blossom and then be let go. So this is a beautiful signification to me of, again, a really great shift and change in that exaltation ruler or that allotment of fortune around the topics of relationships. So the blossoming of a beautiful new relationship coming around the year 2027. And now there is one more eclipse that I even want to show you. So like I said, we have a tidal wave of eclipses here happening. And I think this is all great things for this native and relationships, or the potential of a serious soulmate coming into their life. Now we have a solar eclipse happening up here in the 11th house again at 6 degrees, and that is opposite that natal Venus. So again, this is a wonderful signification, new doors opening for relationships. And the really potent thing about this one, save the best for last, right? Always, is this is also when this transiting Pluto is moving into that 3-degree range, activating natal Venus as well. So we have that solar eclipse happening co-present with Pluto, transiting Pluto, and all activating that natal Venus, which rules the 7th house and also naturally signifies relationships. That Venus is in her own joy here in the 5th house, in that fiery sign of Leo. So I just love this as another potential seeding point or a blossoming of a beautiful new relationship and or soulmate coming into this native's life. Okay, stop sharing there. I hope that you guys all found this super interesting. I certainly did. I love it when we see these patterns like this just show up, where we see eclipses happening across an axis like that. And it's just like boom, 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 boom. And you can almost guarantee that that means that there is going to be a dramatic shift in the karma that this native has experienced in their life up to this point. And so now things will dramatically shift and change. So this native will have to let us know what happens. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time today. Take care and bye.